Is the victim's statement any help?
One of the young detective constables, sitting by the window, shook his head. The festival had only been going for a couple of days, and he already looked tired. Last night, a woman had been robbed at a cash point in the centre of the town, the perpetrator dressed as a medieval knight.
So much for chivalry,
Jerry had lamented when the report came in. The Palkin Festival was a matter of civic pride, and the chief superintendent was concerned that the upsurge of crime it brought with it didn't reflect well on the town. The fact that Jenny Percival had disappeared without trace at the last festival had irked the team for a year. The last thing they needed was yet another incident to cast a pall over the event. The phone on Jerry's desk began to ring, so he hurried back into his office. After a short conversation, he returned to the main office, heading for the desk of a man in his late 30s with dark brown skin, warm eyes, and a fine-featured, intelligent face. The man turned in his seat as Jerry approached.
"Fancy some fresh air, Wes?"
Jerry looked at his watch. It was 10:30 and a beautiful day outside. D.I. Wesley Peterson stood up, as though he was eager to go. He was taller than Jerry by a couple of inches, and considerably slimmer around the waist.
"Why? What's up?" "That call I've just had. It's someone we need to see."
"Who?"
"I'll tell you on the way."
As Wesley followed the DCI out of the police station, the church bell started ringing. But they had competition in the form of distorted pop music blasting out from the fairground rides in the central car park. The heady aroma of hot dogs had begun to scent the air. Jerry pulled a face and muttered something about feeling hungry. Wesley, who had grave misgivings about the hygiene standards of the hot dog stalls dotted around the town for the duration, couldn't share his boss's weakness. The crowds were gathering, meandering along the streets, many in improvised costumes. Some had made a real effort, but most had just donned an approximation of medieval garb and hoped for the best.
"So, are you going to tell me where we're going?"
Wesley asked.
"George Street, to see Jenny Percival's mother."
Wesley had been on a course in Exeter when Jenny disappeared, but he remembered the case all right. And he remembered the newspaper headlines. "Where is Jenny? Puzzle of missing London girl. Have you seen Jenny?" The missing persons inquiry had dominated the papers for a week or so, until the press, both local and national, became weary and moved on to something fresh.
"I thought the mother owned a holiday place in Millicombe. Maybe she sold it."
Jerry said no more as they passed the boat float and headed down the high street, where tall, half-timbered buildings shaded the pavements. George Street was steep and narrow, and led upwards from the little square dominated by St. Margaret's Church. Here the upper stories of the pale stucco cottages jutted out over the thoroughfare. Anyone foolhardy enough to take a car up there would have a difficult time. They reached number 32, a pretty white cottage, smaller than its neighbours, with a slightly soulless look of a holiday let. There was no bell, so Jerry used the large cast-iron knocker. The woman who answered was unhealthily thin, with a helmet of immaculate blonde hair, and a face that, despite a thick layer of makeup, couldn't conceal the fine lines caused by age, or maybe by a year of grief and anxiety. Jerry stepped forward, his face suddenly sympathetic, the caring side of the police force.
"Mrs. Percival, can we come in, love?"
The woman closed the door behind them, plucking nervously at the silk scarf she was wearing, then stood with her back to the door, looking from one man to the other.
This is D.I. Wesley Peterson, by the way,"
Jerry began. Mrs. Percival gave Wesley an absent-minded nod but said nothing.
"You said you wanted to speak to me."
For a while she stood in silence. Then the words came out in a rush. "Jenny's still alive!" Jerry stared at her for a few seconds, stunned.
"What makes you think that, love?"
"Last week, I received a letter saying she's here in Tradmouth. I've come here to find her. I thought I'd better let you know."